Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy History Channel. Tonight, we slip beneath the surface of the world you know, and into a realm where entire cities rest in silence beneath shifting waters. Streets that once echoed with footsteps now lie hidden under waves. Temples, markets, and homes remain where they stood, as if time simply paused and drifted away. These places were not meant to vanish. They were built with purpose, filled with life, and trusted to stand for generations. Yet the earth moved, the seas rose, or the ground itself gave way. And in those moments, whole worlds were quietly taken below. What remains is not just ruin, but memory held in water. Stories that were never meant to be preserved, now waiting in stillness to be found again. If you enjoy these gentle journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, there is nothing you need to do. Let your body settle. Let your breathing slow. Allow your thoughts to drift as we move through these forgotten places beneath the surface. Let's begin. Whole cities now lie beneath seas, lakes, and shifting river mouths. That sounds impossible at first, because cities feel permanent. They feel like the sort of thing that should outlast storms, kings, and generations. Yet all around the world, settlements have slipped below the surface and stayed there. Not as scattered legends, but as real places with real streets. Some rest under salt water. Some lie in cold lakes. Some vanished where rivers changed course and estuaries swallowed the shore. What makes this so gripping is that these were not fantasy worlds. They were ordinary human places, filled with labor, trade, prayer, ambition, and routine. People cooked there, argued there, planned for the future there. Then geography changed, and the map changed with it. Underwater lost cities remind us that the edge between land and water is never truly fixed. It only looks stable while we are standing on it. History knows better, and the sea does too. Some lost cities vanished in a single day of earthquake terror. There is something especially haunting about a city that did not fade slowly, but fell almost all at once. In those moments, the ground that supported every wall, road, and doorway became the instrument of destruction. An earthquake could split masonry, topple towers, and open the earth beneath entire neighborhoods. In some coastal places, the shaking did even worse. It turned waterlogged ground into a churning slurry that could no longer bear the weight of buildings. Streets collapsed. Quays failed. Warehouses slid. Sections of the city dropped toward the harbor. That is one reason places like Port Royal gripped the imagination so powerfully. Disaster was not a rumor that spread over years. It was a violent event that arrived within hours and reordered life forever. A thriving port could become a submerged ruin before survivors had even understood what was happening. Few historical transformations feel so sudden or so brutally final. Some cities drowned so slowly, their people watched the water win. Not every lost city suffered a dramatic last day. Some were defeated by a process so gradual that each year may have seemed survivable on its own. A shoreline crept inward. Saltwater reached fields that used to feed a town. Wells changed taste. Mooring places shifted. Foundations stayed damp. The sea did not attack in one blow. It negotiated, advanced, paused, and returned. That slow kind of loss may be even stranger to imagine, because it forced people to live inside a warning that never quite ended. Families could repair a wall, raise a floor, move goods uphill, or pray for the water to stop. They could hope that the next season would bring relief. Sometimes it did. Then the water came back again. Over years or generations, the balance tipped. Homes were abandoned. Sacred places were left behind. The city was not destroyed in a moment. It was outlasted by the landscape around it. Beneath calm waves, archaeologists have found streets, walls, and temples. That is what makes this subject so astonishing. These are not vague traces or romantic guesses. In many cases, divers and researchers have encountered the unmistakable geometry of urban life. A line of stone appears where no natural line should be. A wall meets another at a deliberate angle. A street runs between structures that still hold the logic of a planned settlement. Then, beyond the practical bones of the place, something more evocative emerges. There are shrines, harbour works, courtyards, and temple remains that reveal how people organized both daily life and sacred space. Underwater archaeology has turned the seafloor into a kind of hidden archive. Instead of opening a chest or unrolling a manuscript, scholars read blocks, foundations, and sediment. What they recover is not merely architecture. It is evidence of intention. Someone designed these places. Someone invested hope in them. And now those intentions wait underwater, patient and intact enough to speak again. One submerged town in Greece may be the oldest known. Pavlopetri has such power over the imagination because it does not feel like a ruined monument. It feels like a real town that somehow slipped out of time. Off the coast of southern Greece, its plan can still be traced with remarkable clarity. Researchers have identified streets, buildings, open spaces, and burial areas that suggest a functioning community with order and shape. What makes the site even more extraordinary is its age. It reaches back into the Bronze Age, which means this place was already old in a world that itself feels impossibly remote. Long before classical marble temples captured the popular imagination, people here were organizing a settlement by the sea. They moved through lanes, traded goods, and lived inside patterns that still make sense to us now. That is why Pavlopetri matters so much. It makes urban life in deep antiquity feel immediate, not abstract. You are looking at town planning with a heartbeat. Egypt once lost an entire port city that history almost forgot. For centuries, Thonis Heraklion drifted between memory and doubt. Ancient writers mentioned it, and traditions preserved its name, but the city itself seemed to have dissolved into legend. Then the sea began to give it back. Off the Egyptian coast, underwater excavations revealed an immense port once tied to trade, religion, and royal power. This was not a minor settlement. It stood at a strategic gateway into Egypt, where ships arrived, cargo moved, and ceremonies unfolded in a place of real consequence. The discovery felt dramatic, not only because statues and ruins emerged from the seabed, but because it restored a city that had nearly vanished from the mental map of history. Imagine forgetting an entire maritime center, then finding it again beneath mud and water. That is part of the thrill here. A place that mattered deeply in its own age slipped from sight so completely that recovery became a kind of historical resurrection. A pirate city in Jamaica still lies broken beneath the harbor. Port Royal already had a reputation so vivid that it barely seems real. In the 17th century, it was one of the busiest and richest ports in the Caribbean. Merchants, privateers, sailors, officials, tavern keepers, and fortune seekers packed its streets. It was a place of money, vice, empire, and danger, perched on unstable ground at the edge of the sea. Then, in 1692, an earthquake shattered that world. Buildings collapsed. Parts of the town dropped into the water. Harbour and city became entangled in wreckage. What gives Port Royal such gripping force is that the disaster sealed a recognizable slice of urban life. Archaeologists do not meet a half-imagined legend there. They meet a colonial port interrupted at speed. The site has become a rare window into a world of trade, conflict, and appetite that helped shape the Atlantic. Few underwater ruins feel so immediate, and few are tied to such a notorious human story. Roman luxury villas now rest on an underwater volcanic coastline. At Baiae, the ancient Roman elite built one of the most extravagant resort landscapes in the Mediterranean. This was a place for pleasure, display, politics, and leisure, where the wealthy came to soak in thermal waters and live beautifully in sight of the bay. Villas spread across a coast shaped by volcanic forces, and that detail matters because the same geology that made the area alluring also made it unstable. Over time, parts of the shoreline subsided. Buildings that had once stood proudly on land slipped beneath the waterline. What survives there today feels almost dreamlike. Divers can move above mosaics, walls, bath complexes, and traces of a world designed for status and comfort. Yet the real fascination lies in the contrast. These were not frontier outposts or desperate settlements. They were monuments to confidence and privilege. Even imperial luxury, arranged with taste and wealth, could not negotiate with a living coastline that kept slowly changing beneath it. Some drowned settlements are older than Stonehenge and the pyramids. That fact changes the emotional scale of the whole subject. It means underwater lost cities are not only about classical ports, famous empires, or recorded catastrophes. Some belong to worlds so old that they reach back before the most iconic monuments of ancient civilization had even been built. Sites like Atlit Yam show that prehistoric communities were already living along coasts, building homes, digging wells, burying their dead, and creating settled lives in places later claimed by the sea. This matters because it pulls the story far deeper into human time. It tells us that rising water has been part of our shared history since long before written records could describe it. Entire chapters of coastal life disappeared before anyone had the chance to preserve their names. What remains now is fragmentary, but the emotional impact is huge. These people were not living in prehistory to themselves. They were living in the present, with futures ahead of them, until the shoreline changed. Lost cities survive underwater because mud can hide them from time. It seems counterintuitive that a place could be protected by sinking, yet that is often exactly what happens. When ruins become covered by layers of sediment, the mud can act like a seal. It shuts out light, reduces disturbance, and shelters fragile remains from the wear that destroys so much on land. A city exposed to weather, rebuilding, farming, looting, and later construction may be broken apart piece by piece. A city buried underwater can be concealed instead. That does not mean perfect preservation, because water can damage plenty of materials, but it does mean that the right conditions can hold a surprising amount in place. Streets may remain legible. Architectural blocks stay near where they fell. Organic traces sometimes endure where dry ground would have erased them. In that sense, mud becomes an accomplice of memory. It does not restore a vanished world, but it can keep enough of it hidden so that centuries later, history still has something remarkable to recover. Avlopetri preserves a town plan with streets, courtyards, and tombs. What makes this place so mesmerizing is its legibility. Many ancient sites survive as fragments, and you need an expert eye to imagine the whole. Here, the layout still speaks with unusual clarity. Researchers can trace streets running between building blocks, recognize domestic spaces, and identify areas that suggest courtyards and burial grounds. That matters because it turns a remote Bronze Age settlement into something startlingly familiar. You are not looking at random stones on a seabed. You are looking at a place that was organized for movement, privacy, memory, and daily life. People passed through these lanes with intention. Families lived within these structures. The dead were placed nearby in ways that reflected belief and custom. A plan like this gives archaeology something precious, which is context. It reveals not only what stood there, but how an entire community arranged itself in relation to work, home, ritual, and one another. Avlopetri was already ancient when the first Greek epics emerged. That timescale is part of its spell. When most people think of ancient Greece, they imagine heroic poems, city-states, and marble sculpture. This site reaches back beyond that familiar world into an earlier age that later Greeks themselves would have regarded as distant. By the time epic traditions about heroes and voyages were taking shape, this coastal settlement had already lived, changed, and passed into history. That creates a wonderful sense of depth. It reminds us that every famous civilization stands on older foundations, and that forgotten communities often came first. The people here belong to a Bronze Age world connected by seafaring, exchange, craftsmanship, and regional networks that spread across the eastern Mediterranean. Their lives were not prologue to someone else's greatness. They were complete lives in their own right. The city matters because it lets us feel how long human urban experience had already been unfolding before the stories we most often remember. Heraklion once controlled a gateway into ancient Egypt. Its position made it powerful. Before later centers rose to greater fame, this port sat where foreign ships and Egyptian authority met. Goods, travelers, officials, and religious processions all moved through a place that could inspect, tax, welcome, and control arrival. That is a thrilling role for any city, because gateways shape entire civilizations. They decide what enters, what leaves, who is admitted, and how outsiders first encounter a kingdom. In this case, the city was not only commercial, it also had sacred significance, which deepened its importance. Temples and maritime activity existed side by side, so political power, economic exchange, and ritual prestige all reinforced one another. A harbor like that becomes more than infrastructure. It becomes a stage where the identity of a nation is performed in public view. To stand in imagination at such a place is to watch Egypt meeting the wider world at water level, with all the ceremony and calculation that implies. For centuries, historians argued over whether Thonis and Heraklion matched. That debate has such appeal because it shows how uncertain the past can remain, even when names survive. Ancient sources referred to Thonis and to Heraklion, and for a long time it was unclear whether they described two separate places or one city known by different names and traditions. That might sound like a narrow, scholarly puzzle, but it changes the whole map of memory. If two names belong to one place, then texts, legends, and records that seem disconnected suddenly snap together. The city becomes larger in both meaning and reach. What is so fascinating here is that the argument lasted across generations of learning. Historians, philologists, and archaeologists all had pieces of the puzzle, but certainty remained elusive until physical evidence from the seabed sharpened the picture. It is a reminder that history is not only about discovery. It is also about long uncertainty, where even a famous city can remain divided in the mind. A single inscription helped prove the two Egyptian names were one city. There is something almost magical about that moment, because history can turn on one surviving piece of text. In this case, an inscription recovered from the submerged site carried enormous weight. It linked the evidence in a way scholars had long hoped for, helping show that the names Thonis and Heraklion referred to the same urban center. Suddenly, what had been an argument became far firmer. This is one of the great pleasures of archaeology. Vast questions sometimes hinge on small, durable objects. not a sweeping speech. Not a perfect archive, just a carved statement that crossed centuries underwater and still had enough authority to settle a dispute. It also reveals how powerful names can be in the ancient world. Different languages, traditions, and political contexts often left different labels for the same place. The inscription did more than identify a city. It stitched together separate strands of memory and gave a lost port its full historical identity again. Canopus sank beside Tunis Heraklion in Egypt's unstable delta waters. Its story widens the tragedy. This was not a case of one unlucky city disappearing in isolation. The Nile Delta was a rich and dangerous environment, full of waterways, fertile ground, commerce, and instability. Canopus flourished there as an important settlement with religious and cultural significance, yet the same watery landscape that supported life also made permanence difficult. Soft sediments, shifting channels, and geological vulnerability created a setting where prosperity sat beside risk. That contrast is part of what makes delta cities so compelling. They thrive precisely because they occupy places of movement. Rivers carry wealth to them, and the ground beneath them can betray them. Canopus belonged to a regional world where sacred centers, ports, and trade routes were closely linked, so its submergence was not just a local loss. It marked the fading of an entire networked landscape. Underwater archaeology restores that broader scene, where multiple places once stood together before the delta slowly reclaimed them. Alexandria also keeps shattered palaces and monuments beneath its harbor. That image is extraordinary because Alexandria was one of the great names of the ancient world. It was a city of learning, dynastic ambition, spectacle, and international prestige. To realize that parts of its royal and monumental landscape now lie underwater changes the way you imagine it. This is not a forgotten provincial harbor rising from obscurity. It is a famous capital whose seafront splendor partly collapsed into the bay. Beneath those waters, archaeologists have documented immense stone blocks, sculptural remains, and architectural fragments tied to the ceremonial world of kings and queens. The scale alone is arresting. These are the remains of power made physical, then broken and submerged. Alexandria therefore offers a special kind of fascination. It shows that even cities already immortal in books and legend still have hidden chapters. The harbor does not merely confirm what was known. It reveals that one of antiquity's brightest urban stages also has a drowned underworld. Port Royal sank so suddenly that daily life was sealed underwater. That is what gives the site such unusual intimacy. Some archaeological places tell us about long processes and broad patterns. This one can feel brutally immediate. Because the disaster struck at speed, parts of the town were preserved in ways that capture interruption rather than gradual decline. The result is a rare glimpse into urban life arrested midstream. Streets, structures, and material remains can reflect commerce, domestic routine, and public activity caught in the aftermath of catastrophe. It is as if the city never had the chance to tidy itself into history. That kind of preservation is deeply compelling because it narrows the distance between us and the people who lived there. You do not have to imagine centuries of slow decay. You imagine an ordinary day cut open by seismic violence. For historians, that creates an archive of suddenness. For listeners, it creates something even stronger, which is the chilling sense that a living town vanished while life was still in motion. Baiae slipped beneath the sea because the ground itself moved. That detail makes the site unforgettable because the enemy was not an invading army or a single storm. It was the earth behaving like a living system. Baiae stood in a volcanic region shaped by forces beneath the surface, and over time, those forces altered the land level itself. This slow rising and sinking of the ground, known from the wider area around the Bay of Naples, meant that coastlines could shift without anyone commanding them to do so. For a city built around elite pleasure, architecture, and shoreline beauty, that was an invisible threat with immense consequences. The sea entered not because walls failed in battle, but because geology kept renegotiating the boundary between land and water. There is something almost unsettling about that. It means people could inhabit luxury without fully understanding that their foundations were part of a restless volcanic landscape. The Rowans now preserve that lesson in the clearest way possible, by existing partly below the waves. Adverts shows that even prehistoric villages could vanish below rising seas. This site carries a very deep emotional charge, because it belongs to a time before cities, kingdoms, and written history, as most people imagine them. Yet it reveals a settled coastal community with real sophistication. People there built homes, managed resources, used a freshwater well, and buried their dead in a place that once stood on dry land. Then sea level rise, unfolding over long stretches of time after the Ice Age, transformed that landscape completely. What makes the site so powerful is that it collapses the distance between prehistory and the modern world. It reminds us that environmental change has been shaping human decisions for thousands of years. People living there would have noticed shoreline change not as a theory, but as a growing reality around their homes. Adverts matters because it gives that process a human face. It turns post-glacial sea rise into lived experience, preserved in stone, burial, and settlement traces beneath the Mediterranean. Adverts preserves a submerged world of farmers, fishers, and herders. What makes this site so compelling is how complete its human picture feels. It does not show one narrow way of life. It reveals a community balancing several at once, with people drawing food and security from land, shore, and sea together. They cultivated crops, kept animals, and fished the nearby waters, which means this was a settlement built on flexibility and skill. That matters because it pushes back against the old idea that very early coastal communities were simple or marginal. These people were not merely surviving at the edge of the Mediterranean. They were making intelligent use of a rich environment and shaping a stable existence within it. When the sea later covered the site, it preserved evidence of that mixed economy in a way few places can match. The result is wonderfully vivid. You can sense a working community whose days were structured by seasons, tides, animals, tools, and deeply practiced local knowledge. Adverts even preserved burials on the Mediterranean seafloor. That detail changes the emotional atmosphere immediately, because graves turn a settlement into a place of memory as well as daily life. When archaeologists encounter burials underwater, the effect is powerful. It means the sea did not only swallow homes and working spaces. It also reached places where people had laid their dead with care, intention, and belief. At Adverts, those burials offer a rare glimpse into prehistoric ritual and social feeling. They remind us that this community had attachments that ran deeper than subsistence. It honored loss. It marked death. It created bonds between place and ancestry. There is something especially moving about those traces resting beneath the Mediterranean now, because they speak across an immense stretch of time without needing written words. The site becomes more than a drowned village. It becomes a human landscape where grief, remembrance, and identity were rooted in the ground long before the shoreline shifted and erased the living world around it. Some underwater cities drowned after earthquakes turned solid ground to liquid. This is one of the strangest and most terrifying ways a city can fail. During severe shaking, waterlogged sediments can lose their strength and begin to behave less like earth and more like slurry. Buildings that seemed firmly founded suddenly have nothing trustworthy beneath them. Walls tilt. Streets buckle. Heavy structures sink, slide, or break apart as the ground stops acting like ground at all. This process, called liquefaction, helps explain why certain coastal settlements suffered such catastrophic collapses during earthquakes. It is not just that the earth moved. It is that the very idea of solid land was briefly suspended. That is a chilling thought, because cities depend on confidence in foundations. Harbors, warehouses, fortifications, and homes are all acts of trust in the surface below. When that trust disappears in minutes, the result can be spectacular destruction. Some lost cities owe their underwater afterlife to that moment of geological betrayal. Others sank because deltas are soft, heavy, and dangerously unstable. Delta landscapes can look like gifts from nature. They are fertile, well-watered, and perfectly positioned for trade, transport, and cultural exchange. That promise has drawn people to them for thousands of years. Yet deltas also hide structural weakness. They are built from layers of sediment laid down by rivers, and those sediments compress, shift, and settle under enormous weight. Add buildings, harbors, canals, and the natural restlessness of branching waterways, and you have an environment where prosperity sits on unreliable ground. That instability makes delta cities especially dramatic subjects for underwater history. Their success often depended on the very geography that endangered them. A port could flourish because ships could reach it easily, while the land beneath its streets slowly compacted and subsided. Over time, that process could lower districts toward disaster. In places like the Nile Delta, wealth and vulnerability were inseparable. The soft earth created opportunity, and the same soft earth helped erase it. Rising post-ice age seas slowly swallowed many coastal settlements worldwide. This is one of the biggest and most haunting stories behind underwater lost cities, because it reaches far beyond any single civilization. After the last ice age, melting ice sheets fed the oceans and shorelines moved inward across the globe. Valleys flooded. Plains vanished. Estuaries expanded. Places that had once been habitable coastal ground ended up beneath water, sometimes far offshore from today's beaches. For the people living through those long transitions, the change would not have felt global. It would have felt local and deeply personal. Familiar hunting grounds disappeared. Campsites and villages became harder to defend or maintain. Paths to the shore changed, then vanished. This matters because it means some of humanity's earliest coastal stories are now physically out of reach beneath modern seas. The seafloor covers chapters of settlement that were never written down. Underwater archaeology offers one of the only ways back into that immense, quiet history of disappearing edges. Volcanic landscapes can lift or lower entire coastlines over centuries. That idea feels almost mythic, yet it is entirely real. In some regions, heat and pressure beneath the earth cause the land to rise and fall over long periods, altering the level of shorelines without any need for dramatic conquest or storm. A quay built at the water's edge may later stand dry inland or sink below the reach of ordinary waves. Entire waterfront districts can find themselves slowly reclassified by geology. This is one reason volcanic coasts are so fascinating in the story of lost cities. They are beautiful, fertile, and often attractive to settlement, but they belong to landscapes that are never truly at rest. People may live there for generations without grasping the full scale of the forces beneath them. Then, centuries later, archaeology reveals that harbors, villas, roads, and baths occupy positions that only shifting land can explain. The coastline itself has been rewritten, and the ruins preserve that rewriting in stone. River mouths create wealthy ports and some of history's riskiest building sites. Few places are more tempting for settlement than the meeting point of river and sea. River mouths collect trade from inland and overseas at once, which makes them natural magnets for merchants, rulers, customs officials, and ambitious communities. Grain, timber, metals, textiles, and ideas can all converge there. That concentration of movement often turns estuaries into engines of wealth and influence. Yet these same places are precarious. Channels migrate. Sediment builds and collapses. Storm surges push inland. Freshwater and saltwater interact in ways that reshape banks and shorelines over time. A port that seems perfectly placed can be slowly undermined by the very conditions that made it thrive. That contradiction gives river-mouth cities a special drama. They are built where opportunity is greatest and certainty is weakest. Again and again in history, people chose those sites because the rewards were enormous. Again and again, water reminded them that prosperity does not guarantee permanence. Harbour cities often sank where trade, power, and fragile geology met. That combination is almost irresistible to history. A harbour attracts ships. Ships attract wealth. Wealth attracts rulers, temples, fortifications, and dense urban growth. Soon the shoreline becomes crowded with ambition. Quays are extended, warehouses multiplied, ceremonial buildings raised, and neighborhoods packed into valuable maritime space. But if the underlying geology is weak, unstable, or slowly subsiding, that concentration of human effort becomes dangerously exposed. The city grows precisely where the earth is least trustworthy. This pattern appears again and again in the story of underwater lost cities, and it is one reason the subject feels so dramatic. These places did not sink because they were unimportant. They often sank because they mattered intensely. Political power and commercial urgency pushed people to build in risky environments that promised exceptional reward. When those environments failed, the result was not a small local inconvenience. It was the collapse or submergence of places that had once stood at the center of regional life. Storms can bury ruins in sand, then uncover them again. The sea floor is not a still museum. It is active, restless, and constantly rearranging what it covers. That is why underwater ruins can seem to vanish and return in cycles. A storm may push vast amounts of sand across a site, hiding walls, anchors, pavements, or building lines that had previously been visible. Then another season, another current pattern, or another powerful weather event can strip some of that cover away and expose the remains once more. This makes underwater archaeology feel almost theatrical. The seafloor lifts its curtain, then drops it again. For researchers, that creates both opportunity and urgency. A feature visible this year may be concealed next year. A newly exposed structure may begin to erode as soon as protection is removed. For everyone else, there is something wonderfully uncanny about the idea. Lost cities are not always hidden in a permanent way. Sometimes they flicker in and out of sight as the sea keeps rearranging the stage above them. Underwater archaeology often begins when erosion exposes a forgotten war. So many discoveries start not with a grand plan, but with a glimpse. A stretch of coast erodes. Sediment shifts. Visibility improves for a moment. Then someone notices a line that should not be there, too straight, too deliberate, too human to be natural. That first exposed wall can change everything. What looked like empty seabed becomes a question, then a survey area, then a site with history waiting beneath the surface. There is a thrill in that beginning because it is so modest. Entire submerged landscapes may announce themselves through one edge of masonry or one worked block emerging from sand. From there, archaeologists build outward with mapping, diving, remote sensing, and careful interpretation. The process has a detective quality that suits this subject perfectly. A forgotten city does not always reveal itself with drama. Sometimes it whispers first through erosion. Then the investigation begins, and a whole missing chapter of the past starts opening around that single exposed clue. Water can preserve wood, rope, and seeds better than dry land. That seems backward at first, because water feels like the enemy of survival. Yet in the right conditions, a wet and oxygen-poor environment can protect fragile materials that would disappear quickly on land. Wood can avoid cracking under sun and wind. Rope can survive where open air would have reduced it to dust. Even seeds may endure, carrying tiny traces of diet, farming, storage, and trade across astonishing stretches of time. This is one reason underwater lost cities are so thrilling to archaeologists. They do not only preserve stone, they can preserve the softer textures of life. A beam tells you how something was built. A cord hints at labor, transport, or fishing. A seed can reveal what people grew, gathered, or moved through a port. Suddenly, the drowned city stops being a skeleton of walls and becomes something warmer and more intimate, with traces of hands, habits, and practical intelligence still clinging to it. Thick seabed mud can protect ruins like a locked archive. When a city sinks into soft sediment, the mud can become less like dirt and more like a sealed room. It wraps fallen walls, broken statues, harbor works, and everyday debris in layers that shield them from disturbance. Sunlight cannot easily reach them. Waves lose much of their force. Later, human activity may pass overhead without ever touching what lies below. That is why some underwater sites remain hidden for centuries, while preserving extraordinary coherence. It is not that time stops. It is that the archive closes. Objects stay in relation to one another. Architectural pieces remain near the settings they once belonged to. Small finds avoid being scattered beyond recognition. For historians, that kind of context is priceless. A ruined city does not only need survival, it needs enough order to be read. Mud provides that order by slowing the chaos that usually tears the past apart. It is concealment, but it is also protection with remarkable historical consequences. Salt water destroys some materials, yet shields others from sunlight and fire. The sea is never simple in what it does to the past. It is destructive and protective at the same time, which gives underwater archaeology much of its strange drama. Salt water can wear down surfaces, weaken certain substances, and create long challenges for preservation after recovery. Yet it also removes dangers that devastate sites on land. Sunlight does not bleach and crack everything below the surface. Wildfires cannot race through a submerged settlement. Builders cannot easily plow, pave, or rebuild over the remains. In some cases, the sea becomes a rough guardian by making a place harder to reach and harder to erase. That double role is fascinating because it resists easy assumptions. Water is not simply a force of ruin. It is an environment with its own rules of survival. A lost city below the waves may be damaged in one way and saved in another. The result is a past transformed, not obliterated, by immersion. Lost cities are often found with sonar before divers ever descend. Modern discovery often begins in darkness, with sound standing in for sight. Sonar sends pulses through the water and measures what comes back, allowing researchers to detect shapes and surfaces hidden below. On a screen, the seabed starts to reveal patterns that no swimmer could notice from above. A line appears too straight to be natural. A cluster looks too regular. A raised feature suggests masonry, harbor construction, or the footprint of a buried structure. Before anyone enters the water, a city can begin announcing itself through echoes. That is part of the wonder of this field. Ancient ruins are often found through highly modern senses. Instead of stumbling across a temple face to face, archaeologists may first encounter it as data, contour, and anomaly. Then the excitement builds. The abstract image becomes a target for closer survey. The survey becomes a dive plan. Sound leads the way, and the first whisper of a drowned city arrives through technology. Magnetometers can reveal buried walls hidden beneath seafloor sediment. Some discoveries happen because archaeologists learn to notice what the eye cannot. A magnetometer measures subtle changes in the magnetic character of the seabed, which can help reveal buried features that remain completely invisible from above. That may include stone constructions, fired materials, metal concentrations, or disturbances caused by old human activity. In practical terms, it means a seemingly empty patch of sea floor may contain the outline of a vanished urban space. Nothing dramatic is visible. No wall breaks the surface. Yet the instrument detects a buried story. This is captivating because it turns hidden cities into puzzles of physics as much as history. The seabed becomes a page written in variations too faint for ordinary perception. Archaeologists read those variations and begin to sketch what lies below. Then targeted excavation or diving can test the picture. A wall that no diver could see may already have announced itself through a magnetic signature, waiting for someone to know how to listen. Archaeologists now map drowned cities in 3 dimensions with astonishing precision. That capability has changed the field profoundly because underwater ruins no longer have to remain vague in the imagination. Using photography, laser-based methods in some settings, acoustic survey, and digital modeling, researchers can build detailed 3-dimensional reconstructions of submerged sites. Streets, columns, blocks, harbor structures, and scattered debris can all be recorded in relation to one another with remarkable accuracy. This matters for more than visual appeal. It allows scholars to study how a city was arranged, how it collapsed, and how different parts of the site relate across space. It also helps preserve knowledge when the physical remains are difficult to access or vulnerable to erosion. For the rest of us, there is something extraordinary about it. A place once lost in murky water can be turned into a navigable model that scholars explore almost as if they were walking through it. The drowned city becomes legible again, not only as ruin, but as form. Underwater robots can reach places where human divers struggle to work. Some submerged sites lie too deep, too cold, too hazardous, or too prolonged for easy human exploration. That is where underwater robots become invaluable. Remotely operated vehicles and autonomous systems can descend into environments where divers would face serious limits. They can carry cameras, lights, sensors, and mapping tools into awkward gaps, unstable zones, and depths that once kept important ruins beyond practical reach. This expands the map of what history can recover. A collapsed harbor quarter or deeply buried architectural field does not have to remain a rumor simply because it is difficult to reach safely. There is also something fitting about the image itself. Human cities that vanished beneath the sea are often rediscovered by machines gliding silently through dark water, bringing back pictures from worlds no one has seen for centuries. The technology feels futuristic, but the mission is ancient at heart. It is still about entering the unknown and returning with news from the lost. Murky water can make a famous lost city nearly invisible. Fame does not guarantee visibility. A site may be celebrated in books, museums, and documentaries, yet underwater conditions can make it maddeningly hard to perceive in person. Suspended sediment clouds the water. Light fades quickly. Currents stir the bottom. A massive block or wall may appear only when you are almost beside it. That creates a wonderful tension in underwater archaeology. The city can be historically famous, and visually elusive at the same time. Divers may know they are moving across one of the great submerged sites on Earth, yet see only fragments emerging from haze. This matters because it reminds us how hard discovery can be even after a place is known. Recognition on a map is one thing. Actual work in the water is another. The sea does not present its treasures neatly. It obscures, distorts, and withholds. The result is that even a renowned drowned city can still feel secretive, partial, and strangely shy. Ancient harbors are often identified by anchors, quays, and cargo remains. A harbor announces itself through the traces of movement and exchange. You may not begin with a grand temple or a standing wall. Instead, you find the working signs of maritime life. Stone anchors suggest repeated mooring. Quay structures indicate deliberate waterfront construction. Cargo remains hint at ships arriving with goods from elsewhere, then unloading into storage, markets, or customs systems nearby. Piece by piece, a port starts to emerge from its practical fingerprints. This is one of the pleasures of underwater archaeology. A city can be recognized not through its skyline, but through its traffic. The evidence is transactional, yet wonderfully revealing. A harbor is where a settlement opens itself to the wider world. It is where strangers arrive, goods change hands, and local life connects to faraway economies. When anchors and cargo begin to cluster around built waterfront features, archaeologists are not merely finding objects. They are finding the pulse points of a drowned commercial landscape. A submerged city can survive as scattered clues long before walls appear. Not every discovery begins with a dramatic outline of buildings. Often the first signs are small and dispersed, easy to overlook unless someone knows their significance. Pottery fragments appear where no ordinary seabed process should concentrate them. Worked stone turns up among natural rock. A carved piece, a metal object, or a dense patch of cultural debris suggests repeated human presence. At that stage, the city exists only as a possibility made of fragments. Yet that is often how the mystery begins. Archaeologists learn to treat these clues as the edge of a larger pattern. A few scattered finds can imply streets still buried, architecture still sealed, and an urban site waiting beneath layers not yet disturbed. There is something deeply enticing about that phase. The city is present, but only in hints. History has not revealed its full shape. It has only dropped breadcrumbs into the water. Then the search widens, and the invisible starts slowly becoming imaginable. Thonis Heraklion yielded colossal statues from a vanished sacred port. Few discoveries announce a lost city more dramatically than giant stone figures rising from the seabed. At Thonis Heraklion, archaeologists recovered colossal statues that once stood in a ceremonial landscape tied to power, worship, and public display. Their scale matters because cities use size to send messages. A towering figure tells visitors that they are entering a place of consequence. It tells merchants, pilgrims, and officials that the harbor belongs to a world backed by divine and political authority. Finding such monuments underwater creates a strange reversal. What was built to dominate the skyline now lies beneath silt and currents, silent and displaced, yet still commanding. These statues do more than impress. They prove that the city was not a minor anchorage lost by chance. It had the resources, labor, and ambition to build at monumental scale. Even after submergence, those vast carved presences still broadcast the same message. This was a place meant to be seen. Its temples show religion and trade were inseparable in ancient Egypt. In a port like this, commerce did not stand apart from sacred life. Ships arrived with cargo, but they also entered a ritual world shaped by temples, offerings, and divine authority. That combination is important because it reveals how ancient Egypt understood order. Trade was not merely economic movement. It unfolded inside a moral and ceremonial framework that linked prosperity to the gods and to legitimate rule. A harbor temple could bless passage, receive gifts, and anchor political meaning at the exact point where foreign contact began. That makes the city feel richer and more complex than a simple marketplace. It was a place where exchange carried spiritual significance, where merchants moved through spaces that also affirmed cosmic balance and royal power. The waterfront was therefore both practical and symbolic. When archaeologists uncover sacred architecture in such a setting, they are seeing more than devotional life. They are seeing how belief and business helped hold an entire maritime world together. The city thrived before Alexandria stole its maritime importance. There is something wonderfully sharp about that historical shift, because it reminds us that greatness can be displaced as well as destroyed. Before Alexandria rose to eclipse its rivals, Thonis Heraklion held a commanding place in Egypt's maritime system. It handled arrivals, controlled access, and benefited from the traffic that connected the Nile world with the wider Mediterranean. Then a new center emerged with stronger political backing, larger ambitions, and a more dazzling future. The older port did not suddenly become unreal. It simply lost the position that had once made it indispensable. That is a familiar drama in history, yet underwater lost cities make it feel more poignant. A harbor can be central in one age, secondary in the next, and eventually forgotten altogether. In that sense, the sea did not create the city's decline by itself. History had already begun to move on. Submergence completed the process, but loss of importance had started earlier in plain sight. Canals once ran through Thonis Heraklion like watery streets. That image is one of the most captivating in the whole subject, because it makes the city feel almost dreamlike and practical at once. Water was not merely outside the settlement at the harbor edge. It threaded through the urban fabric itself. Canals linked spaces, guided movement, and helped define how people navigated the city. That would have shaped daily experience profoundly. Goods could move through watery corridors. Ritual processions could approach sacred spaces along controlled routes. Neighborhoods and working zones would have related to one another through channels as much as through solid ground. This matters because it gives the city a distinctive personality. It was not just a port with nearby water. It was a place structured by water internally, almost as if river and sea had been invited into the city's design. Once that landscape sank, those canals gained a strange afterlife. What had once been managed urban water became part of the surrounding submerged world. The city's fall was probably a chain of disasters, not one blow. That kind of ending is often more unsettling than a single dramatic catastrophe. A famous city can disappear from memory because several different pressures combine over time, each one weakening it further. In the case of Thonis Heraklion, scholars point to a likely mix of geological instability, subsidence, possible seismic events, and the broader vulnerability of delta terrain. That means the city may have been undone by accumulation rather than a single instant of doom. One failure makes the next more likely. Ground weakens. Structures strain. Water gains advantage. Recovery becomes harder. This is historically important because it reflects how many real places fall apart, through linked crises rather than neat endings. It also feels more human. People may have believed each setback could be managed, only to discover that the system as a whole was failing around them. By the time the city passed below the water, its defeat may already have been unfolding through a sequence too complex to resist. Underwater finds can overturn arguments that lasted for centuries. That is one of the great thrills of archaeology. The debate can linger across generations, shaped by incomplete texts, disputed identifications, and scholarly caution. Then the seabed yields something solid, and the whole argument changes. Underwater discoveries are especially powerful in this way because they often restore evidence from places that seemed permanently inaccessible. A statue base, an inscription, a harbor structure, or a cluster of related finds can force historians to redraw old conclusions. Suddenly, what was treated as uncertain becomes persuasive. What was once dismissed may become central. This makes underwater archaeology feel almost dramatic in the classical sense. The lost city returns not only as a place, but as a witness. It enters a long conversation and changes the balance of proof. That is deeply satisfying because it shows history is not fixed by tradition alone. The past can still surprise the present. It can still intervene, correct, and sharpen what people thought they knew. Alexandria's drowned monuments reveal how royal power reached the sea. Royal power is often imagined in palaces, thrones, and ceremonial courts, yet coastal capitals projected authority outward as well. In Alexandria, the harbor zone was part of that projection. Monumental architecture near the water announced dynastic prestige to anyone arriving by ship. It turned the approach to the city into a political experience. Visitors did not simply enter a port. They encountered a stage set by rulers who understood spectacle, hierarchy, and symbolic control. That is why the drowned remains matter so much. They show that sovereignty extended all the way to the shoreline, where maritime access and royal image met. The sea was not outside the realm of power. It was one of the places where power displayed itself most deliberately. To recover fragments of that seafront world underwater is to glimpse how carefully the city managed first impressions. Even broken and submerged, those remains still testify to a state that wanted to be admired before anyone stepped ashore. Hundreds of massive architectural pieces still lie in Alexandria's waters. The scale of that underwater field is hard to absorb. We are not talking about a few isolated fragments resting by chance in a harbor. We are talking about a vast scatter of monumental remains, heavy blocks and carved elements large enough to belong to an urban landscape of major importance. Each piece carries the weight of a building program, a royal project, or a ceremonial setting that once stood above water in full public view. Now those elements lie below the surface in an altered geography, detached from the skyline they once helped define. That abundance matters because it tells us the submergence was not minor. Significant portions of the ancient waterfront world were broken, displaced, and absorbed into the harbor environment. For archaeologists, such density creates both excitement and challenge. The remains are impressive in themselves, but they must also be interpreted as parts of a larger urban puzzle, one scattered across the seabed at monumental scale. Egypt's sunken cities show that fame can disappear astonishingly fast. This may be one of the most unsettling lessons in the whole story. A city can be important, well-connected, ritually significant, and widely known in its own age, yet still slips so far from memory that later generations struggle even to place it with confidence. We tend to assume that greatness protects a place from oblivion. These sites prove otherwise. Fame depends on continuity, on records being preserved, on political relevance lasting, and on physical traces remaining accessible enough to keep memory alive. Break those links, and even a celebrated port can begin to fade. Over centuries, names drift, stories blur, and the real place drops below the threshold of common knowledge. That is why rediscovered underwater cities feel so dramatic. They return with the force of contradiction. They remind us that prominence is not permanence. A city may dominate one era and nearly vanish from the next, not because it lacked importance, but because history itself is fragile. Sometimes the sea does not erase a city, it stores it. That is a beautiful and deeply useful way to understand underwater loss. Erasure suggests total disappearance, as if nothing meaningful remains. Storage suggests concealment, delay, and the possibility of return. In many cases, the sea acts less like a destroyer than a keeper with difficult conditions. It breaks some things, hides others, and preserves enough that the city can still be approached again centuries later. Not whole, not untouched, but legible in ways that matter. Streets may survive as alignments. Monuments may survive as fallen masses. Daily life may survive in objects no one expected to see again. This idea changes the emotional tone of the subject. A drowned city becomes not simply a tragedy, but a repository waiting for the right questions and tools. The water closes the archive from ordinary access, then guards it imperfectly through time. When archaeologists return, they are not starting from nothing. They are opening a storage room history forgot it had. Port Royal was once one of the richest ports in the Caribbean. Before disaster made it legendary, Port Royal made itself indispensable. It sat at a strategic crossroads of empire, shipping, and private fortune, drawing merchants, sailors, investors, and officials into one intensely crowded harbour town. Wealth moved through it in staggering amounts. Goods from across the Atlantic world passed over its wharves, and with them came news, ambition, vice, and danger. That concentration of money gave the place an almost electric reputation. Taverns thrived, warehouses filled, ships loaded and unloaded at relentless speed. What makes this so fascinating is that the city's richness was not decorative. It was functional and immediate. Port Royal mattered because it was plugged directly into the violent machinery of early modern trade. To imagine it at its height is to picture a place where opportunity felt close enough to grab, and where fortunes could be made with astonishing speed. It was prosperity balanced on a narrow strip of vulnerable ground. The earthquake of 1692 hurled much of it underwater. When the disaster struck, it did not merely damage the town. It transformed the map. The earthquake shook Port Royal with devastating force, and the unstable ground beneath parts of the settlement failed catastrophically. Buildings collapsed, sections of land dropped, and whole pieces of the waterfront slid into the harbour. Contemporary witnesses describe terror that feels immediate even now, because the event combined violent motion with sudden engulfment. The sea did not wait patiently offshore. It entered the catastrophe as an active force, swallowing streets and structures in the same historical moment. What grips the imagination here is the speed. A port crowded with life, money, and noise was reconfigured in hours. Familiar places disappeared below water, while survivors tried to understand what remained. In the story of lost cities, this is one of the clearest examples of a thriving urban center crossing from ordinary time into legend almost instantly, through one terrible and unforgettable rupture. Port Royal gives archaeologists a frozen glimpse of colonial urban life. Some sites preserve long stories of change. This one preserves interruption. That difference gives Port Royal unusual power, because archaeologists can approach a colonial town not only through records and ruins on land, but through material evidence locked close to the moment disaster struck. Streets, buildings, and objects together offer a view into how an active port actually functioned. You can begin to sense patterns of trade, domestic habits, storage, architecture, and public movement, with a level of immediacy that is rare for the period. It is not simply that the city was important. It is that part of its everyday fabric was arrested before later rebuilding could blur the picture. For historians, that creates something close to a snapshot. For listeners, it creates a thrilling intimacy. The colonial world often feels distant and abstract. Port Royal makes it startlingly physical, with a townscape that still carries the tension of life interrupted, rather than life gradually forgotten. Submerged forts and streets still trace the shape of disaster. There is something deeply eerie about a city whose damaged outline remains readable below the water. In Port Royal, the pattern of the catastrophe can still be followed through surviving streets, defensive works, and collapsed urban spaces that mark where the town once stood. That matters because the disaster did not erase all structure into chaos. It left a broken map. The forts show how seriously the harbour was guarded, and the street lines show how tightly organized the settlement had been before the ground failed. Together, they reveal impact through form. You can sense where security, commerce, and everyday movement once aligned, then where the event tore those alignments apart. It is like reading a historical wound in plan view. Few archaeological sites let you see destruction so spatially. The city remains legible enough for the disaster to have geometry, and that makes the whole episode feel chillingly concrete rather than merely dramatic. Its ruins also expose the brutal economies of empire and slavery. Port Royal's fascination should never be mistaken for innocence. Its wealth was tied to larger systems of conquest, forced labor, maritime violence, and extraction that shaped the early modern Atlantic. That is part of what gives the site its moral weight. The city was not simply lively or prosperous. It was embedded in an imperial economy that enriched some through the suffering and dispossession of many others. Archaeology can help reveal that harder truth by grounding glamour in material reality. Warehouses, fortifications, trade goods, and urban density all point toward a port sustained by networks of coercion as well as commerce. This matters because underwater lost cities are not only romantic mysteries, they are records of how power actually worked. In Port Royal, the submerged remains allow us to look past the myth of pirates and spectacle and confront the harsher world beneath it. The harbour held profit, but it also held the machinery of human exploitation. Baiae was Rome's playground before the coastline betrayed it. Among Roman coastal places, Baiae had a reputation for pleasure that bordered on scandal. It drew the wealthy with warm waters, elegant villas, social display, and the promise of leisure lived at a high level. This was where status could be enjoyed in public view. Politics, luxury, and relaxation mingled in a landscape designed to flatter the senses. That makes its later submergence especially compelling. The coast that had made the place so desirable eventually worked against it. What had been an asset became a vulnerability. There is almost a dramatic irony to that reversal. A shoreline chosen for beauty and indulgence turned out to belong to a restless environment that would not remain fixed. Baiae therefore feels different from a fortress or working port lost to disaster. It was a destination for enjoyment, which gives its underwater survival a strangely elegant sadness. Rome's great seaside retreat was not conquered. It was slowly undone by the setting it loved. Emperors and elites built villas there on restless volcanic ground. That choice tells you everything about Roman confidence. The area around Baiae offered natural beauty and thermal pleasures because it belonged to an active volcanic region. The same geological energy that heated baths and shaped the landscape also meant the ground could shift over time. Yet that did not discourage the powerful. They built lavish residences, terraces, and bathing complexes, as if scenery and status were enough to command permanence. It is fascinating to imagine that decision in hindsight. Men with wealth, influence, and architectural ambition invested in a coast whose foundations were never entirely stable. They were not building temporary retreats. They were building statements of rank and taste in stone. That makes the site feel wonderfully human. It shows how people are drawn toward places that offer beauty and prestige, even when those places carry hidden risk. Baiae preserves that tension perfectly, with luxury architecture set against geology that had its own long plans. Today, divers can swim above Roman roads, baths, and mosaics. That experience must feel almost unreal because the remains are not just isolated artifacts. They form parts of a recognizable built world. A diver moving over submerged Baiae can trace road surfaces, pass the outlines of bath complexes, and glimpse mosaic floors that once belonged to spaces of movement, conversation, and display. It is one thing to view ancient architecture in a museum. It is another to encounter it resting in its own altered landscape underwater. The familiar features of Roman life are still there, yet transformed by immersion into something dreamlike. What makes this so captivating is the double vision it creates. You see the engineering and order of Rome, but you also see how completely nature has changed the terms of that order. A road meant for footsteps now lies under drifting light. A floor built for elite comfort now receives currents instead. The city survives, but in a new element that changes every impression. Baiae, drowned through slow geological subsidence rather than sudden conquest. That distinction gives the site its unique mood. Many famous ruins invite stories of invasion, fire, or abrupt collapse. Baiae tells a quieter and more unsettling story. The city was not dramatically overthrown by enemies. Instead, the land itself gradually sank in relation to the sea. Geological subsidence worked over time, lowering parts of the coast until architecture that had once stood proudly on dry ground ended up underwater. This matters because it strips away the familiar historical drama of battle and replaces it with something more patient. No triumphant army caused the loss. No single heroic defense failed. The coastline simply changed beyond what human intention could control. That makes Baiae a powerful reminder that history is shaped not only by politics and war, but by slow planetary processes moving beneath them. The ruins feel serene today, yet their serenity comes from a long surrender to forces that no Roman statesman could negotiate with. Few places show Roman luxury sinking so gracefully into the sea. There is a strange beauty to Baiae that sets it apart. The remains do not only testify to loss. They create an image of elegance altered rather than annihilated. Mosaics, walls, sculptures, and bath structures survive in a setting where water softens the whole scene without making it meaningless. The result is almost theatrical. Roman refinement has not vanished. It has changed medium. That transformation is part of why the site lingers in the imagination. Luxury often seems built on certainty, on the assumption that wealth can secure comfort against disorder. Baiae quietly disproves that idea. The architecture is still impressive, but it now belongs to a coastline that moved on its own terms. What survives feels poised between pride and surrender. You can still sense the world of elite taste and pleasure, yet it is filtered through the calm of submergence. Very few lost cities make decline look so hauntingly composed. Petri feels modern because its streets still make urban sense. There is something startling about looking at a Bronze Age settlement and feeling that you understand it almost immediately. That is part of Petri's power. Its layout does not feel random or primitive. It feels planned in ways the modern mind can still recognize. Streets connect spaces with logic. Buildings relate to one another in ways that suggest intention rather than accident. The result is a strange kind of familiarity across immense time. You are not only seeing antiquity, you are seeing urban thinking that still feels legible today. That matters because it narrows the distance between us and the people who lived there. They were solving practical problems we would understand at once. How should movement work? How should homes connect to shared space? How should a settlement hold together? Petri feels modern not because it resembles a city of glass and traffic, but because it reveals that clear spatial intelligence is far older than most people imagine. Its survival lets archaeologists study Bronze Age planning unusually clearly. Many Bronze Age settlements survive only in fragments, which means scholars often have to reconstruct the whole from scattered remains. Petri offers something rarer. Because the site lies underwater and retains a readable layout, archaeologists can examine how a community was arranged with unusual directness. That opens a remarkable window onto planning in a very early urban world. Researchers can consider how movement was organized, how structures clustered, and how different zones may have related to work, storage, burial, and domestic life. The clarity matters because it allows larger questions to be asked with greater confidence. Was planning formal or flexible? Did the settlement grow in stages or according to a stronger overall design? How much coordination was required to produce such coherence? A site like this turns those questions from speculation into something much more grounded. It gives the Bronze Age a level of urban intelligibility that is often difficult to recover, and that makes it extraordinarily important. The site shows that even very early towns could be organized. People sometimes imagine the earliest towns as loose collections of buildings that only later grew into real urban places. Petri challenges that assumption. It suggests that organized settlement did not arrive suddenly in a later, more sophisticated age. It was already present in communities far older than many viewers would expect. That is fascinating because it changes the emotional shape of prehistory. Instead of picturing small groups improvising without structure, we begin to picture people making deliberate choices about layout, access, and shared space. Organization itself becomes ancient. This matters beyond one location. It hints that the instinct to arrange community life carefully may have been stronger and earlier than popular imagination allows. Early towns were not waiting for civilization to begin. They were participating in it already, on their own terms and at their own scale. A submerged place like this, therefore, expands the story of human settlement, making order feel deep-rooted rather than late arriving. Petri was not myth, but an ordinary community made extraordinary by loss. That may be one of the most moving aspects of the site. It was not a legendary capital, a royal wonder, or a place already wrapped in exaggerated fame. It seems to have been a working settlement where people lived ordinary lives, and that is exactly why it matters so much. Most of human history was not made in palaces. It was made in communities like this, where people managed households, exchanged goods, raised families, and moved through familiar streets without imagining that anyone thousands of years later would care. Loss transformed that ordinary place into something extraordinary. Once the sea took it, the town gained a second life as evidence, mystery, and emotional witness. That reversal is powerful because it honors people who were not trying to become unforgettable. They became unforgettable because disappearance preserved them in a special way. Underwater lost cities are often most affecting when they bring back lives that were never designed for grandeur. Adlitiam proves prehistoric coastlines hold histories far older than famous empires. When people hear the word history, many still picture pharaohs, emperors, and written records. Sites like Adlitiam ask us to go much deeper. They show that coastlines were already hosting settled human worlds long before the great named empires took shape. That matters because ancient shorelines were not empty stages waiting for civilization to arrive. They were inhabited, worked, and remembered by communities whose stories mostly vanished when the sea advanced. A site like this therefore expands the map of importance. It says that human depth is not measured only by monuments or famous dynasties. It is also measured by the quiet persistence of early communities whose traces now lie underwater. There is something thrilling about that shift in perspective. The sea floor begins to look less like a place of isolated ruins and more like a submerged library of forgotten beginnings. Entire chapters of human coastal life may rest there, older than the empires that usually dominate imagination. Its stone well hints at daily life before the sea arrived. A well is such a humble thing, yet it can make the past feel vividly alive. Temples and statues impress us, but a well brings us closer to routine, need, and repetition. It tells us that people return to the same place again and again for water, and that this simple act helped organize the rhythm of the settlement. At Atlition, the presence of a stone well suggests a world of ordinary movement before submergence. People drew water there for drinking, cooking, washing, and work. Children would have known the place. Adults would have measured their days around it. That is why the feature matters so much. It anchors the site in lived experience. You stop thinking only about prehistoric abstraction and begin imagining footsteps, containers, voices, and habit. When the sea later covered the settlement, even that basic center of daily necessity passed below the surface. The result is deeply affecting, because survival and loss meet in one practical structure. Submerged villages remind us that climate change shaped human history early. It is easy to think of climate change as a modern story alone, framed by recent industry and current anxiety. Submerged prehistoric settlements complicate that picture in an important way. They show that changing climate has influenced where humans could live for a very long time. After the last ice age, warming temperatures helped drive major sea level rise, and that transformation altered coasts across the world. Communities near those coasts had to adjust, move, or disappear. This does not make the present less urgent. It makes the human relationship with environmental change feel longer and more serious. The past was never static. Landscapes shifted, and people felt those shifts directly in their homes and livelihoods. Underwater villages preserve that truth in a poignant form. They are not abstract evidence on a chart. They are places where human lives met a changing world and lost ground. That gives the subject both historical depth and emotional force. The first great drownings happened long before written memory existed. That thought changes the atmosphere of the whole topic. It means some of the most consequential losses in coastal human history left no texts, no named witnesses, and no written lament. Entire landscapes could be transformed before anyone had the means to record what was happening in words that survived. The result is a silence at the foundation of the story. The earliest great drownings are known mainly through geology, archaeology, and the stubborn traces of settlement now hidden below water. That makes them feel immense and elusive at the same time. They mattered profoundly to the people who lived through them, yet most of their emotions are unrecoverable. We can infer movement, abandonment, adaptation, and disappearance, but not the exact voices that responded. There is something haunting in that gap. Some of the deepest chapters in the story of underwater lost cities belong to events that were historic in every human sense, except that no history book existed yet. Some lost cities vanished before anyone had words to mourn them. This is perhaps the saddest idea in the whole subject. Not because early people lacked feeling, but because they lacked surviving written language in which later generations might hear that feeling directly. A coastal settlement could be abandoned to rising water, and the grief of that loss might never pass into preserved words. No surviving chronicle would describe the leaving. No inscription would name the final fear. No historian would record the last season before departure. Yet the loss was real all the same. Homes were left. Memory was broken from place. The sea entered lives that had their own attachments and meanings, even if those meanings now reach us only through archaeology. That makes underwater sites from deep prehistory emotionally distinctive. They are full of human significance, but much of that significance must be approached through material traces rather than voice. The silence is not emptiness. It is the afterimage of grief from a world whose language did not survive. Underwater archaeology can recover history from ages that left no chronicles. That may be its greatest gift. Written history is powerful, but it is selective. It favors states, elites, official memory, and societies that preserve texts in durable form. Entire stretches of human experience fall outside that record. Underwater archaeology helps bring some of those stretches back. A submerged settlement, harbor, or ritual site can reveal how people lived, built, moved, and adapted in periods where no surviving chronicle speaks for them. That is a thrilling corrective. It means the sea floor can supply evidence for histories that were never written down, or were written in forms that did not last. Instead of reading a ruler's version of events, archaeologists read landscape, architecture, tools, plant remains, and burial practice. The method is different, but the result is still history, rich with human intention and consequence. In that sense, underwater archaeology does something almost miraculous. It gives narrative weight to ages that silence would otherwise have hidden almost completely. China's Lion City was not anciently lost, but deliberately flooded. That fact gives the whole subject a sudden twist, because not every drowned city belongs to deep time or forgotten catastrophe. Xicheng, often called Lion City, was submerged in the 20th century when a reservoir was created for a hydroelectric project. In other words, this was not a place swallowed by mythic forces or slowly erased from memory over millennia. It was a known city with a location, a history, and a planned end. That makes it fascinating in a different way. The water did not discover the city after history had abandoned it. The water arrived because modern authorities chose to let it in. There is something deeply unsettling about that kind of loss. It feels both administrative and irreversible. A place that had stood through dynastic change and long human continuity was not ruined by invading armies or ancient earthquakes. It was sacrificed in the name of modern progress, then preserved in the stillness that followed. Xicheng became a time capsule when a reservoir sealed it away. Once the valley flooded, the city entered a new kind of existence. Instead of remaining exposed to rebuilding, traffic, weather, or demolition, it passed into a protected underwater state that unexpectedly helped preserve it. That is why the site so often captures the imagination. A planned inundation created a sealed environment where architecture could endure with unusual clarity. The city did not continue changing in the ordinary way. It was interrupted, enclosed, and held in suspension beneath the reservoir surface. That makes it feel less like a ruin in the usual sense and more like a paused world. Streets, facades, and ornamental details survived in ways that suggest a city waiting, rather than a city destroyed. The modernity of that transformation is part of its eerie charm. A human engineering project created the conditions for a historical archive underwater. Progress buried the place, but in burying it, also protected large parts of its visible character. Its carved gateways survived underwater with startling sharpness. That is one of the most arresting details about Lion City, because gateways are meant to welcome the eye. They are decorative, symbolic, and public. When such features survive underwater with crisp outlines and intricate carvings still visible, the effect is unforgettable. It means the city did not simply leave behind foundations or rubble. It kept some of its ceremonial face. Stone ornament, animal motifs, inscriptions, and architectural framing all help preserve the impression of a lived and meaningful urban environment rather than a bare archaeological shell. This matters because carved gateways carry civic personality. They suggest pride, craftsmanship, local identity, and the desire to make arrival feel significant. To find those qualities intact beneath a reservoir creates an uncanny emotional contrast. The architecture still performs its old task of impressing visitors, yet the visitors now arrive by dive rather than by road. The city remains expressive, even though its audience has completely changed. Some underwater cities were sacrificed for modern engineering, not ancient disaster. That distinction opens an entirely different emotional register. We often imagine lost cities as victims of nature, time, or geological violence. Yet some were submerged by deliberate human choice, usually in connection with dams, reservoirs, and national development projects. In those cases, the loss was measured, planned, documented, and approved before the water rose. That can feel colder than an ancient catastrophe because the disappearance happened with foresight rather than surprise. Officials knew what would be drowned. Families knew what would be left behind. Maps, surveys, and relocation plans turned the end of a city into a managed process. The result is historically fascinating and morally complex. These places were not simply overwhelmed by events beyond human control. They were exchanged for electricity, irrigation, or flood management in the language of public necessity. Underwater lost cities therefore do not belong only to the distant past. They also belong to the modern age of state power and engineered transformation. A lost city can be created by governments as well as nature. That idea feels almost paradoxical at first, because a lost city sounds like something that happens by accident. Yet modern states have sometimes produced submerged urban landscapes through policy, planning, and infrastructure. A reservoir project can redraw geography just as decisively as an earthquake or rising sea. Once the decision is made, roads end, homes are emptied, and an inhabited place is converted into a future underwater site. That gives these cities a distinctive emotional tone. The disappearance is not mysterious in origin. It is recorded in files, meetings, and official decrees. The loss was made on paper before it was made in water. That is what makes it so compelling. It reveals that the power to erase a city can be bureaucratic as well as geological. Nature does not hold a monopoly on disappearance. Human institutions can produce it too, with timelines, signatures, and justifications. The result is a kind of planned haunting built into the modern landscape. Lakes hide drowned towns just as surely as seas do. When people picture underwater ruins, they often imagine coasts, harbors, and saltwater horizons. Lakes deserve their own place in the story. They can swallow settlements completely, whether through natural expansion, tectonic change, landslides, or the creation of artificial reservoirs. A lake may appear calm and enclosed, yet it can hide streets, walls, churches, and whole neighborhoods with the same finality as the ocean. That contrast is part of the fascination. The setting feels gentler, but the disappearance is just as real. In some cases, lake water even preserves architecture in ways that make the loss more visually striking. Bell towers, facades, and masonry can survive in haunting forms, especially when conditions remain relatively stable. Lakes also bring the subject closer to inland human life. They remind us that submergence is not only a coastal drama. It can happen far from open seas, in landscapes that seem sheltered, intimate, and secure until the waterline changes forever. Reservoir cities feel eerie because their disappearance had witnesses and paperwork. There is something peculiarly haunting about a lost city whose end was not guessed at later, but observed in real time. People watched the water rise, Officials recorded the process. Engineers calculated levels. Residents were relocated, compensated, or compelled to leave. The whole disappearance passed through administration before it passed underwater. That creates a mood unlike ancient submergence. Instead of legend, there is documentation. Instead of uncertain memory, there are records, maps, photographs, and living testimony. Yet that does not make the result feel less ghostly. In some ways, it makes it more so. The city was known too clearly at the moment of loss. Its final days were not swallowed by silence. They were witnessed, signed, and filed. That bureaucratic precision sits strangely beside the emotional reality of a place being erased. Reservoir cities therefore occupy a rare space between history and memory. They are not lost because no one knew them. They are lost despite the fact that many did. Modern floods can preserve architecture that war or weather might have ruined. This is one of the strangest reversals in the whole subject. Flooding is destructive, yet in certain circumstances it can also rescue buildings from slower forms of damage that might otherwise have destroyed them completely. Once submerged, a structure may be shielded from redevelopment, repeated human use, vandalism, or ordinary surface weathering. A town that remained above water through the modern era might have been altered beyond recognition. Underwater, it can keep details that land would not have spared. That does not make inundation benign, because communities still lose homes, streets, and belonging. Yet it does create an unexpected historical outcome. A modern engineering decision or sudden flood can accidentally become a preservative force. Architecture survives because life around it stops. This is especially compelling in recently submerged places, where buildings still look recognizably complete. They seem less like ruins from antiquity and more like deserted worlds paused just beyond reach, protected by the very water that displaced them. Not every underwater city belongs to remote antiquity. That truth reshapes the imagination at once. Many submerged sites do reach back thousands of years, but others come from periods much closer to our own. Some belong to early modern worlds. Some were inhabited into the 19th or 20th centuries. A drowned city can therefore feel historically near, even while physically inaccessible. That nearness matters because it changes the emotional texture of loss. Instead of imagining people from a barely grasped age, you may be imagining communities whose architecture, clothing, language, or family records feel much more familiar. The city is underwater, but not alien. You can sense continuity between their lives and ours more directly. This is one reason the subject holds such broad appeal. It is not trapped in one historical register. It stretches from prehistory to modernity, and each part of that range carries a different kind of wonder. Some lost cities deepen ancient mystery. Others create the shock of recent disappearance. Some were inhabited within living family memory. That may be the most intimate form of underwater loss. In certain cases, the people forced to leave a submerged town are not separated from us by epic distance. Their children or grandchildren may still remember stories told at the table, the names of streets, the shape of local buildings, or the exact day the water claimed the old place. That transforms the idea of a lost city completely. It is no longer only an archaeological subject. It becomes a matter of inherited memory and family identity. A submerged settlement can survive in official records, but it can also survive in private recollection, which gives it a different kind of afterlife. Someone may still remember where the market stood. Someone may still know which house belonged to which family. That closeness is powerful because it reminds us that not all drowned worlds are ancient enough to feel abstract. Some remain emotionally present, held in voices that have not yet gone silent. Dwarka's underwater remains sit at the crossroads of archaeology and legend. Few places show the tension between evidence and imagination more vividly than Dwarka. Off the coast of Western India, underwater remains have drawn intense interest because the name already carries enormous cultural and religious resonance. That creates a fascinating situation. Archaeologists are not investigating an unknown spot with no expectations attached. They are working in the shadow of the city that already lives powerfully in story, devotion, and historical curiosity. The remains themselves matter on their own terms, as traces of past coastal occupation and maritime activity. Yet every stone and structure is also pulled into a larger question about memory, identity, and the relationship between sacred tradition and material proof. That makes the site unusually compelling to the public. It feels like a meeting place between two different ways of approaching the past. One asks what can be demonstrated underwater. The other asks why certain places remain meaningful long before excavation begins and long after it ends. Off India's coast, exploration continues where faith and evidence meet. What makes this search so captivating is not only what lies underwater, but the atmosphere surrounding the search itself. In some places, archaeology begins with a technical question. Here, it also begins with belief, reverence, and long cultural memory. That does not make the investigation less serious. It makes it richer and more delicate. Researchers study submerged structures, seabed formations, and cultural remains with the tools of archaeology, while many observers approach the same waters with spiritual significance already in mind. The two perspectives are not identical, yet they share the same horizon. That creates a rare kind of historical drama. The sea becomes a place where science measures, maps, and compares, while faith continues to preserve meaning that does not depend on excavation alone. For listeners, that combination is deeply gripping. It shows that the past is not always approached from a single direction. Sometimes it is approached from devotion and data at the same time. Lost cities often grow larger in memory after the sea takes them. Once a city disappears beneath water, it begins to change in the imagination. While it remains inhabited, people know its inconveniences, its ordinary corners, its politics, and its flaws. After submergence, much of that everyday reality falls away. What survives in memory is often cleaner, grander, and more emotionally charged. The city becomes a symbol as much as a place. Its beauty is emphasized. Its significance expands. Its final loss begins to overshadow the more ordinary truth of how people actually lived there. That process is deeply human, and it helps explain why drowned cities often acquire such magnetic power. Water does more than hide them physically. It also gives memory room to enlarge them. What was once local can become legendary. What was once familiar can become mysterious. In that sense, submergence changes the story twice. First, the city is lost from sight. Then it is rebuilt in memory, larger and more haunting than it may ever have been above water. Atlantis still haunts every discussion of drowned civilizations. No name rises faster in the popular imagination than Atlantis. Even when archaeologists are discussing real submerged settlements with strong evidence, the idea of a great city lost beneath the sea hovers nearby. That is part of Atlantis's extraordinary grip. It has become the default image of underwater civilization, a symbol so powerful that it shapes expectations before facts even enter the room. This matters because Atlantis is not just a story about a place. It is a story about sudden destruction, vanished greatness, and knowledge slipping beyond recovery. Those themes echo perfectly through the wider subject of drowned cities, which is why the legend refuses to stay at the margins. Every real discovery seems to invite comparison, even when the comparison is misleading. Yet that haunting presence is fascinating in itself. It shows how deeply the human mind wants the sea to conceal not just ruins, but a lost pinnacle of civilization. Atlantis remains the shadow all real sites must pass through. Yet most real sunken cities are more interesting than pure legend. Legends promise perfection. Real sites offer texture, complexity, and surprise. That is why genuine underwater cities often become more fascinating the closer you look. A legend may describe a glorious lost world in broad strokes, but archaeology reveals how actual people built harbors, managed water, traded goods, buried their dead, displayed power, and adapted to unstable landscapes. Real places come with practical details, and those details are where the wonder often lives. A carved quay, a road grid, a collapsed bath complex, a harbor channel, or a well can tell a richer story than any idealized myth. You begin to see not an abstract civilization, but a lived world full of decision, risk, and human intention. That makes real sunken cities more compelling than fantasy for a simple reason. They do not only satisfy curiosity, they deepen it. Each answer opens another question. Instead of one perfect lost city, you get many different lost worlds, each stranger and more revealing than expected. Yonaguni may be ruins, or a trick of fractured stone. That uncertainty is exactly what makes Yonaguni so irresistible. Off the coast of Japan, divers have encountered a dramatic underwater formation with flat surfaces, sharp angles, and terrace-like steps that seem almost too regular to be natural. To some observers, it looks like architecture from a vanished world. To others, it is an extraordinary but geological formation shaped by natural fracturing and erosion. The fascination lies in that unresolved tension. Human minds are built to detect pattern, especially when a pattern hints at hidden civilization. Yonaguni tests that instinct at the edge of certainty. It asks how much order nature can produce, and how quickly people will interpret that order as intentional design. That makes the site important, even beyond the question of what it is. It reveals something about us. We do not only search the sea for evidence, we also search it for meaning, and Yonaguni shows how powerful that search becomes when the answer refuses to settle. Disputed sites reveal how badly people want the sea to hide secrets. There is a special excitement around any underwater site that remains uncertain, because uncertainty invites desire. When evidence is incomplete, people rush to fill the gap with possibility. A natural formation might become a temple. A scatter of stones might become a drowned metropolis. A few suggestive shapes can ignite enormous hopes that the sea has concealed something astonishing. This is not only about error. It is about longing. People want mystery with depth, and underwater settings provide it perfectly. The sea already feels like a keeper of withheld truths, so any disputed site arrives with built-in suspense. That makes argument part of the attraction, rather than a barrier to it. Scholars debate cautiously. Enthusiasts imagine boldly. The public listens for the moment when uncertainty might tip into revelation. In that sense, disputed sites are not lesser stories. They are mirrors of appetite. They show how strongly people want the underwater world to contain one more impossible secret. The most famous underwater city on Earth may still be fictional. That is a remarkable thing to admit, because the world contains many real submerged cities with astonishing evidence behind them. Yet none has eclipsed the fame of Atlantis. A place that may never have existed as a literal sunken civilization still dominates the cultural imagination more strongly than Thonis Heraklion, Port Royal, i.e., or Pavlopetri. That says something profound about myth. It does not need archaeological confirmation to become globally influential. It needs the right emotional ingredients, and Atlantis has them all. Grandeur, mystery, catastrophe, and total disappearance combine into a story almost engineered for permanence in the mind. Real sites often ask for patience and careful interpretation. Atlantis offers immediate dramatic scale. That difference helps explain its staying power. Still, there is an irony here that makes the topic even more interesting. The most famous drowned city may be fictional, while real underwater cities continue yielding evidence far richer than the legend that overshadows them. Legends persist because coastlines really do drown, shift, and disappear. Myths of sunken places do not emerge from nowhere. They endure because the world itself provides the raw experience behind them. Coasts erode, harbors silt up. Earthquakes alter shorelines. Tsunamis strike. Sea level changes over generations. River mouths migrate. Entire stretches of familiar land can be transformed, and communities living near those transformations carry the memory forward. Over time, that memory may become stylized, simplified, or wrapped in sacred language, but it usually begins with something real enough to frighten people and force adaptation. That is why legends of lost coastal worlds feel so believable across cultures. They resonate with genuine environmental instability. A shoreline that seems permanent can change far faster than people expect, and once it does, memory works hard to preserve the shock. The resulting stories may not preserve exact geography, but they often preserve emotional truth. The land was there. Then it was not. That is enough to sustain legend for centuries. Myth often begins where genuine geological trauma meets human memory. This is where the whole subject becomes especially powerful, because geology alone does not create myth. Human experience does. An earthquake, a tsunami, a collapsing coast, or a steadily advancing sea becomes mythic only when people carry the memory of it forward, in story, ritual, warning, and shared imagination. Over generations, the raw event may lose detail while keeping emotional force. A drowned settlement becomes a sunken kingdom. A devastating wave becomes divine punishment. A coastal collapse becomes a tale about arrogance, fate, or sacred order. That transformation is not a failure of memory. It is one of memory's oldest forms. It turns trauma into narrative that can survive beyond direct witnesses. Underwater lost cities sit close to that process, which is why they stir the imagination so intensely. They occupy the borderland where physical evidence and inherited story can still touch. The seabed holds remains. Human culture holds meaning. Myth often grows in the space where the two remain entangled. Sunken harbors can rewrite trade maps of the ancient world. A lost harbor can change far more than a local story. It can alter our understanding of how whole regions were connected. When archaeologists identify a submerged port, they're not just finding stone and sediment. They're finding a node in an old network of ships, merchants, taxis, languages, and goods. A harbor tells you where people arrived, what routes were practical, and which coastlines mattered more than written sources sometimes suggest. That is why these discoveries can feel so electrifying. A city once missing from the map may turn out to have been a major gateway. Suddenly, an old trade route looks busier, an inland kingdom looks more connected, and a famous rival port looks less dominant than historians once assumed. In that sense, underwater archaeology does not merely fill blanks. It redraws relationships. A drowned harbor can force scholars to rethink how commerce moved across entire seas, and which cities quietly held the keys. Drowned temples reveal where pilgrims once traveled by water. Temples near or beneath the water can tell us something deeply human about ancient movement. People did not only sail for profit, war, or transport. They also traveled in search of blessing, healing, ritual duty, and divine presence. When archaeologists recover submerged sacred sites, they sometimes uncover traces of spiritual roots that linked coastlines, islands, and river systems in ways written records only hint at. That is what makes these places so compelling. A temple by the water's edge was not just a local shrine. It could be a destination, a threshold, or a stopping point for pilgrims who approached by boat with offerings and expectation. Water itself may even have shaped the ritual experience, turning arrival into part of devotion. Once the sea covered such places, it hid not only architecture, but journeys of belief. Their recovery helps restore a forgotten geography of worship, where faith moved across channels and harbors just as surely as trade once did. Submerged cemeteries show the sea invaded places meant for the dead. There is something especially haunting about a drowned cemetery, because burial grounds are created with the hope of permanence. They are places meant to resist forgetting. Families choose them to hold memory in one fixed location, apart from ordinary traffic and daily noise. When the sea reaches such a place, the emotional effect is different from the loss of a warehouse or street. It feels like an intrusion into a space already set aside for endings. That is why submerged cemeteries carry such force. They show that changing shorelines do not respect the human wish to separate the dead from danger. The sea can cross even that boundary. Archaeologically, these sites are powerful because they reveal mortuary custom, social structure, and the placement of sacred memory within the landscape. Emotionally, they are powerful because they dramatize loss twice over. A community was lost, and the places where that community honored its dead were lost with it. Lost cities prove coastlines are far less permanent than they look. A beach, a harbor, or a low coastal plain can feel fixed when we stand on it. Maps reinforce that illusion. Buildings reinforce it even more. Yet underwater, lost cities expose how deceptive that stability can be. The shoreline is not a hard boundary. It is a negotiation between land, sea, sediment, weather, and deep geological force. Over years, centuries, or millennia, that negotiation can shift dramatically. A place that once seemed safe for homes, markets, shrines, or ports can become submerged, eroded, or unrecognizable. That is part of why this subject feels so philosophically rich. It challenges one of our most basic assumptions, which is that the ground beneath a city is the most reliable part of it. Often, it is not. The coast simply appears settled until it moves. Lost cities preserve the evidence of that movement in the clearest way imaginable. They show that permanence on the shore is often only a pause in a longer process. Some ruins survive because looters could not easily reach them. Access shapes survival more than many people realize. On land, a famous ancient site may endure centuries of quarrying, souvenir hunting, opportunistic digging, and organized looting. Valuable pieces are removed. Context is destroyed. Architecture is broken apart for reuse. Underwater, the same site may escape some of that fate, simply because reaching it is difficult, dangerous, or expensive. Depth, currents, poor visibility, and the need for specialized equipment can all act as accidental protection. That does not make submerged sites safe, but it can buy them time. This is one reason some underwater cities retained such remarkable coherence. Their inaccessibility kept them out of the ordinary reach of those who might have stripped them apart long ago. There is something almost ironic in that. The same water that helped hide a city also helped defend it. Difficulty became preservation. A barrier that excluded everyday human contact allowed parts of the past to remain where they had fallen. Others are threatened precisely because diving technology now can. The very tools that help archaeologists recover underwater history can also expose it to new danger. As diving equipment, remote vehicles, and seabed imaging have improved, more sites have become reachable than ever before. That is a triumph for knowledge, but it also creates risk. Once a submerged city can be located, filmed, and accessed with relative ease, it can attract unauthorized recovery, souvenir hunting, commercial exploitation, and careless disturbance. Fragile context may be damaged by curiosity alone. A site that survived for centuries because it was hard to reach may become vulnerable the moment technology removes that difficulty. This tension gives underwater heritage a modern urgency. Discovery is no longer the final challenge. Protection is. The sea can no longer be relied upon as a sufficient guard. Human capability has changed the balance. In a strange way, the lost city becomes endangered by being found in an age when access has become faster, cheaper, and more widespread. Anchors, amphorae, and statues can mark a city before walls do. Sometimes a city first announces itself not through architecture, but through the debris of activity that surrounded it. An anchor suggests repeated mooring and maritime traffic. Amphorae suggests storage, transport, trade, and exchange across distance. A statue suggests public display, ritual life, or civic ambition. When such objects begin appearing together in one underwater area, they can hint at urban presence even before any wall or street line becomes visible. That is one of the most exciting aspects of underwater archaeology. The city reveals itself through behavior before it reveals itself through plan. You begin to sense docking, unloading, worship, and public life through the things people left behind in motion. These clues feel almost like a pulse detected beneath the seabed. They do not yet form a skyline, but they suggest one. Long before masonry rises into view, the pattern of objects may already be telling archaeologists that a submerged urban world is very close. Every underwater excavation is a race against currents, corrosion, and time. Underwater archaeology may look calm from a distance, but the work is full of pressure. Currents can limit visibility, shorten safe working periods, and make careful recording much harder than it would be on land. Corrosion continues acting on exposed materials. Organic remains may begin deteriorating once they are uncovered. Sediment shifts can hide features again or strip protection away from fragile areas. Even the simple act of documenting a site is slowed by conditions that constantly resist precision. That is why excavation below water carries such intensity. Researchers are not only investigating the past, they are negotiating with an environment that never stops altering what it holds. Every decision matters. What to expose, what to leave buried, what to conserve first, what to record before the tide turns. The work has a measured urgency that suits the subject perfectly. Lost cities are not passive discoveries. They are active, difficult encounters with history under conditions that keep trying to close the archive again. UNESCO now treats underwater heritage as history worth protecting, not salvaging. That change in attitude is hugely important. For a long time, underwater finds were too often approached as treasure to be recovered, displayed, or sold. The emphasis fell on objects with visual or monetary appeal rather than on context, meaning, and the integrity of the site as a whole. UNESCO modern framework pushes against that older mindset. It treats submerged heritage as part of the shared human past, deserving of protection, careful study, and ethical stewardship rather than commercial exploitation. This shift matters because underwater cities are more than collections of artifacts. They are historical environments. Remove the best pieces without proper method, and you destroy the relationships that make the site intelligible. Protection, therefore, becomes a way of preserving story as much as material. The goal is no longer to strip the sea floor for dramatic finds. It is to respect the city as evidence. That idea has helped transform underwater archaeology from treasure hunting into a much more serious historical discipline. The sea floor is one of archaeology's greatest, quietest archives. That may be the simplest and most powerful way to understand the whole subject. Beneath the water lies an archive unlike any other, one built not of shelves and paper, but of streets, harbors, wells, statues, burials, tools, cargoes, and entire landscapes caught in altered time. It is quiet because it does not announce itself easily. It waits under sediment, darkness, and depth until someone learns how to ask the right questions. Yet its scale is immense. Coastlines have shifted for thousands of years. Ports have sunk. Villages have drowned. Ritual places, working places, and everyday places have all passed below the surface. Together they form a record of human life that is still only partly known. What makes this archive so extraordinary is that it preserves not just information, but worlds. It holds the arrangement of lives in space. When archaeologists open even a small part of it, the result can change how we imagine both history and the sea itself. A drowned city can preserve a single catastrophe with shocking intimacy. Some sites do not merely tell us that disaster happened. They let us feel how suddenly it entered ordinary life. When a city sinks in the course of one violent event, the remains can preserve a moment of interruption rather than a long decline. That difference is astonishing. Rooms may still contain the arrangement of daily existence. Streets may still reflect patterns of movement that ended without warning. Harbor spaces can reveal commerce caught in the same brutal pause. This gives certain underwater cities a rare emotional force. They do not seem worn down by centuries. They seem struck. The past feels closer because the rhythm of life has not been fully erased by later rebuilding, looting, or slow change. Instead, catastrophe becomes legible at human scale. You can imagine the last ordinary morning far more vividly. That intimacy is what makes these sites so gripping. They preserve not only destruction, but the terrible speed with which normal life can disappear. It can also preserve centuries of slow abandonment beneath accumulating silt. Not every underwater city ends in terror. Some seem to fade with a patience that is somehow just as haunting. In those places, silt settles layer by layer across the remains, covering the traces of a community that was not shattered in a single blow, but gradually left behind. That kind of preservation tells a different story. It suggests changing shorelines, altered trade routes, failing infrastructure, or a long retreat from a place that no longer worked as it once had. The city becomes quieter over time. One district empties, then another. Repairs become rarer. Activity narrows. Eventually, the sea and sediment take over the work of closure. What survives beneath that cover can hold the memory of abandonment itself, not just of ruin. That is what makes these sites so absorbing. They preserve the slow dimming of urban life, where disappearance happens not like an explosion, but like a lamp going lower and lower until darkness finally wins. Underwater ruins reveal what people built where they trusted the shoreline. Every coastal ruin begins with confidence. Someone looked at that edge of land and believed it was suitable for a home, a quay, a market, a shrine, or an entire district of urban life. That decision is what makes submerged cities so revealing. They show us exactly where past people placed their trust. They trusted beaches that later retreated, deltas that later sank, and harbor fronts that later broke apart. In doing so, they left behind a map of human hope pinned against environments that were more unstable than they seemed. That is what makes underwater archaeology feel so intimate. It is not only about what was built, but about what was believed. A shoreline looked safe enough for investment, effort, and attachment. Families rooted themselves there. Authorities fortified it. Builders shaped it with stone. Then time exposed the risk hidden inside the promise. The ruins remain as evidence of that original trust, and of how precarious it could be. Many ancient ports prospered precisely because they lived on unstable ground. That sounds like a contradiction, yet it lies at the heart of coastal history. Ports often grew rich in places where rivers met the sea, where sediment created sheltered access, or where low-lying coasts made harbor construction attractive and trade unusually convenient. Those same settings could be geologically weak, prone to subsidence, flooding, erosion, or shifting channels. The danger was built into the opportunity from the beginning. This is one reason underwater lost cities are so revealing. They show that success and vulnerability were often created by the same landscape. Merchants did not choose risky shorelines by mistake. They chose them because those shorelines could make a city flourish. Political power followed commerce. Temples, storehouses, and crowded neighborhoods followed power. The port became indispensable, even while its foundations remained uncertain. That tension gives these sites their special drama. Prosperity was never separate from hazard. In many cases, the exact conditions that made a city wealthy also made its eventual loss far more likely. The ocean hides cities, but it also keeps returning them. There is something almost theatrical about the way the sea behaves toward the past. It conceals a city for centuries, then releases part of it through erosion, shifting sand, a chance dive, or the snag of a fishing net. A wall appears. A statue emerges. A pattern becomes visible where only water seemed to be. This rhythm of concealment and return is one of the most enchanting features of the subject. The ocean is not a final curtain in the simple sense. It is a moving cover that sometimes lifts. What has been lost can come back in fragments, and those fragments can be enough to reopen entire historical questions. That is why underwater cities feel so alive in the imagination. They are hidden, yet never fully gone. The sea withholds them, then offers them back, piece by piece. Each return feels like a message from a world thought absent, arriving late, but with extraordinary power. Some lost cities are discovered only because fishermen snag something impossible. Not every discovery begins in a research vessel with carefully planned surveys. Sometimes it begins with confusion. A fisherman hauling gear from familiar water suddenly brings up worked stone, carved material, a piece of masonry, or an anchor that has no business being there. That moment can be electrifying because it interrupts ordinary labor with the first sign of a buried world. The sea floor had been crossed countless times without revealing its secret. Then one impossible object breaks the pattern. What makes this so appealing is the sheer unpredictability of it. A city may wait beneath the water for centuries, and the first hint comes not through theory, but through accident. Someone snags the past by mistake. From there, curiosity grows. Divers investigate. Archaeologists map. A single baffling find expands into a site, then a story, then a revision of local history. Discovery in such cases begins with surprise rather than intention, and that gives it a wonderful spark. Others reappear after storms strip away the seabed like a curtain. A storm can be destructive, but it can also become a sudden revealer. When powerful waves and currents scour the seabed, they may remove the sand and sediment that had concealed ruins for years or even centuries. What was hidden below can briefly stand exposed again, as if the sea has pulled back a veil. This is one reason underwater archaeology often carries an element of urgency. A structure visible after one storm may be covered again after the next. The opening can be brief, yet those brief openings can be transformative. A harbour line may become legible. Masonry may emerge where no one suspected a site existed. A submerged city can step back into view for just long enough to change what people know about a coast forever. There is something wonderfully dramatic about that. The seabed is not fixed scenery. It is a shifting stage, and storms sometimes yank the curtain aside to reveal history waiting underneath. The next famous drowned city may already be mapped, but not understood. That possibility is thrilling because modern technology has raced ahead of interpretation. Researchers can now gather immense amounts of underwater data, from sonar images to digital terrain models and magnetic anomalies. In some cases, the outlines of something significant may already exist in databases, survey files, or research archives without its full meaning being recognized yet. A pattern may have been recorded before anyone knew what story it belonged to. That means the next major revelation might not require a dramatic new dive into unknown water. It may require a new question, a fresh comparison, or a sharper reading of evidence already collected. This gives the subject a special kind of suspense. Discovery is no longer only about finding. It is also about understanding. A drowned city may already have announced itself in signals and shapes, waiting for the moment when someone connects the clues correctly. The map may exist before the meaning does, and that is deeply exciting. Underwater, lost cities turn geology into history, and history into suspense. That may be the most elegant way to capture their power. Geological change by itself can seem vast, impersonal, and slow. History by itself can seem focused on people, dates, and decisions. Underwater cities force those two worlds together. A sinking delta, a restless fault, a rising sea, or a shifting coast becomes inseparable from the lives built upon it. Suddenly, geology is no longer background. It becomes a historical actor. At the same time, history takes on the suspense of a mystery. What happened here? How fast did the loss unfold? What remains below? What part of the story is still missing? That fusion is what makes the subject so irresistible. It is neither pure natural history nor pure human drama. It is both at once, joined in a form that keeps unfolding as evidence emerges. The result is a story where the planet shapes events, and where every discovery deepens the sense of unresolved tension. They remind us that every shoreline city lives on borrowed ground. This final truth reaches beyond the ancient past and touches the present directly. Shoreline cities can feel immortal when they are busy, wealthy, and full of light. Their ports hum, their buildings rise, and their streets seem anchored to the coast forever. Yet underwater lost cities tell a different story. They show that no shoreline is possessed absolutely. It is occupied for a time, negotiated with, and sometimes surrendered. That idea gives the whole subject its lingering force. The ruins are not only about vanished peoples. They are warnings written in real places. They remind us that harbors, waterfront districts, and low-lying coastal settlements always depend on conditions that can change. Sometimes those changes are slow enough to ignore until it is too late. Sometimes they arrive with brutal speed. By the way, the lesson endures. Coastal greatness is real, but it is never unconditional. Every city by the water stands where land and sea have only temporarily agreed. As we come to the end of this journey, those hidden places begin to settle in the mind a little differently. We started with cities that vanished in moments, and others that slipped away so slowly no one could quite mark the day they were gone. We wandered through ancient harbors where ships once gathered, through sacred spaces where belief met the water's edge, and through streets that now rest in silence beneath shifting sand. We saw how power, trade, faith, and ordinary life all found their way to the shoreline, and how the shoreline, in time, moved on. Some of these places were lost to nature. Others were given to the water by human hands. Some became legend. Others waited quietly to be found again. Yet all of them share the same quiet truth, that the boundary between land and sea is never quite as certain as it feels. Now, there is nothing more you need to hold on to. Let those images drift. The broken columns, the quiet streets, the slow movement of water above them. Let them fade into something softer, something distant. If you enjoyed this journey, you might like to continue with another story waiting for you on the screen. And if you feel like it, you can like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps this space grow and helps others find their way here too. But if your eyes are heavy now, there is no need to go anywhere else. Just rest here for a moment. Let your breathing slow. Let the day slip further away, like a shoreline fading into the distance. Sleep well, and good night.